Hey Dr. F, this is my oral explanation for my final. My broad topic is independent learners, and the 5 focuses that I'd like to hit are constructivism, autonomy, self-efficacy, motivation, and assessment. And throughout this, I'm going to use examples that would pertain to a music teacher, so examples that I would hope to use in the classroom one day. And with that, let's begin with constructivism. So, what is constructivism to me and why do I want to use it? Well, it's problem-based learning and it's posing questions. So, for example, and I have here a little bit of music drawn out, right? Normally what students see on the page is this, and oftentimes you'll see a dynamic marking. It kind of looks like an awkward V below the music. Now, these are dynamics, so it means grow, shrink down, let your sound get louder, go softer. And a lot of times in elementary schools and middle schools, people tend to say, hey, make this louder, make this softer, rather than having the students kind of express for themselves what they'd like to discover and what they'd like to do. So let's say we're conducting a piece. We say, okay, stop here. Can someone tell me where the dynamics are in this part of the song? Have someone answer. Then everyone else is like, oh, okay, students get it. And then pose another question. How can we bring them out? So how can we express these dynamics? We found them. Good. Now let's take the next step to discovering what we can do to bring the piece to life through these dynamics. Constructivism is also very helpful in group work in the sense that we pose a question to the students, send them off in groups, and then kind of see what they come up with, what they develop, and what they end up finding. So that's one of the ways, a couple of ways that I find constructivism very helpful. Something else that's really important, especially as a musician, is to be autonomous. So autonomy is very huge. Why? Okay, so it promotes independence. You have to be independent. It promotes self-everything, not just self-efficacy or not just self-discipline or not just self-regulation. It's a combination of many, many different things. And it enables people to run on their own. So tying back to constructivism, the group work idea, right? If students are autonomous enough that they've come to the point where they can be autonomous, you put them in these groups. Let's take, for example, a group of trumpets, okay? We send them off from the ensemble and we say, you guys are to work on your part, separate from the ensemble. Once they are autonomous, they're able to run their own group. They're able to essentially work through constructivism on their own. So they don't need me to pose the questions. They can pose them themselves. Something else is improving in rehearsal without being told. So in a rehearsal setting, for example, here's your common choir. You have multiple arcs, or actually, let's use this as an orchestra or a band, right? We go high voices to low voices, high voices to low voices. And there's, of course, many individual people that sit throughout the ensemble, and so on and so forth. Now, a lot of times in professional orchestras, these people are one on a part, which means that it's only one person playing each important part. And why it's important to be autonomous and committed to yourself is that if you screw up, there's no one else to back you up on your part. It's just you. So to be able to run on your own and know what you're doing is very crucial as a musician. And now we move on to self-efficacy. Why is this important? So it's their students' self-worth. It's how they feel, and how you feel as a musician is very important because out of everything in the world, music is an all-inclusive package. And by that I mean it's physical, it's mental, and it's emotional. And you put all three in when you play a piece. So if you don't feel emotionally confident in who you are and confident in your ability to play the music won't sound as the composer intended it to. Students need to feel like they're needed, like they really belong in the ensemble. Here's an example for you. I'm going to just tilt this down so we can see a little better. And I will point things out because I know the lighting is a little tough. So we have a big band, right? It's your typical jazz band. You have 4 to 5 trumpets, 4 trombones, 5 saxophones, and a rhythm section that can contain of roughly 3, 4, 5 people. Now in a big band, many different people have their own part. So when you write this kind of music, there are 5 saxophone parts for 5 different players, and that's it. And students need to feel like they belong here. That's why I think it's really crucial to have a jazz program, because a lot of times you have one instrument and it shows the student, we want you because you do this. We want you because you can do this. And out of that, that promotes autonomy and that they become completely autonomous in their part and they know what they're doing. And as a result of that, the entire group collaboratively grows and they elevate themselves to the next level. So I think autonomy and self-efficacy can kind of go hand in hand, but you need self-efficacy in order to be autonomous, and that you need to be confident in who you are first in order for this to, like I said, elevate to the next level. And from here, we move to self-regulation, which is very crucial as a musician. Now, some people have different reasons why. For me, self-regulation means it goes hand in hand with self-discipline. So let's take a music example classroom. You are in a wind ensemble, for example, and you are one on a part and you're struggling with this. Now, self-regulation and self-discipline is going to say, instead of going out with your friends that night, you're going to sit and learn that run. You're going to sit and learn these 4 measures and make sure that you have them solid for the ensemble, because you want to be sure that the ensemble can run and you want to feel good about your part. So that ties back again to self-efficacy. But self-regulation is important because it keeps you in check. And as a musician, that's very, very important. For a music director, let's take, for example, my hometown. That program was about 130, 140 students. That is a lot to look after and constantly test and constantly examine and constantly kind of keep your eye on and make sure that they're doing what they're supposed to be doing. If students have this concept of self-regulation down, they don't need the teacher to be constantly doing things. Their practice sessions are completely taken care of. They know what they're doing. They're essentially running their own kind of constructivist, autonomous view in the respect that they're posing questions to themselves and they know how to fix them, and they're working towards fixing them on their own. So all these concepts end up tying up together in the end. Something else that's really important with self-regulation is knowing where your place is and knowing how to perform in the ensemble where you belong. So in my let's say, experience, self-regulation also ties into knowing where you fit in terms of sound, right? So what I like to think of here is, we all know the food pyramid. Let's talk about the sound pyramid. So it's divided up a couple different ways, right? So the biggest block at the bottom is our low voices, our tubas, our low strings. The bigger the instrument, the louder you should play because your sound is deep. Why this is important. So you need a balanced sound. If you hear a very high, heavy sound, so you have a lot of flutes, a lot of piccolos, a lot of clarinets, and your ears are ringing and the old people's hearing aids are going off, you're not going to have an enjoyable performance. Now, that's unfortunate because a lot of times when students start out, they go for the smaller instruments because it's easy to carry around, not a big deal. You think it's super, super easy. So we need to adhere to this sound pyramid. Now, the higher up you go, you're going to find different voices. So let's say at the very top, we've got our flutes, piccolos, clarinets. At the bottom, we have tubas, string bass, so trombones could even fit kind of on that line because they have some higher sounds as well. So myself being a saxophone player, I end up going kind of across the board. I work in between here, and when you work with different students, it's important for them to know where they fit in the music and to have the self-regulation to hold back. A lot of times, everyone wants to be a hero in the ensemble. They want to say, I'm going to make sure my sound is heard because I want to be the soloist. That is not how we go about running a music rehearsal. We need to be sure that we all work collaboratively as a group to achieve this goal, and everyone has their specific role. So don't trample on the low voices. Make sure they have their sound. Part of self-regulation is knowing kind of how you are and having the guts to say, I did this wrong, and knowing that you're going to fix it and having the discipline to say that you're going to sit down and fix it. So that's why self-regulation to me is a very important topic in terms of music. So we get to assessment. We're going to write in a lot on this one. So in music, I believe we have, of course you have informal and authentic assessment, kind of more formal, how we do this, how we sit down, how we kind of do it without students knowing. So informal, and I'm actually going to add formal on here as well, I think are really important to note because A lot of times teachers will only revert to the idea of formal. So we're going to have students sit in a quiet room with the director, and they're going to be tested on what they know. And they're going to say, okay, play this from this measure to this measure. And 9 times out of 10, including myself, the students will shake and probably tremble. Their sound will become wavery. It's not a proper way of assessing your students. If they perform that way under pressure, fine, then good for them. But not everyone is that way. 9 times out of 10, they aren't. So, different ways of doing informal assessment, right? Just listening. Really, really easy listening. Standing in front of the ensemble, and when you have a small group, that is one advantage, where you're able to listen and say, so-and-so isn't getting that part, but so-and-so is. And you don't need to point these out in the ensemble. You simply just make a note of it in your score. You say, Joe missed this, or Brennan did this, or whatever the case may be. Another way of informal assessment is problem posing. So, we work in small groups, for example. We ask the students, hey, can someone tell me what this means? Really easy. Someone raises their hand. That means forte. What does forte mean? That means loud. What does piano mean? Piano means quiet. What does this mean? What does this mean, right? And we go down the line. We give students just fun questions. Pretend it's a game. And in truth, you're assessing their ability to know these topics, to understand what they're doing, to be more relevant in what they are as a musician. So formal assessment, that's where it gets kind of touchy because everyone's like, how are we going to assess students individually? So we have a fantastic program called Smart Music. And essentially it's an online playback track. We hook a microphone to the student's instrument, and then the student plays with a professional recording their part. The system then recognizes their part and listens. The student can make a game out of it. How high can you score? What's the best % you can get while playing your part? And as a result of that, you can trick them into saying, oh, this is a game, but at the same time, this is your quiz grade for this class. Because now, and thank God, band is becoming a class, choir is becoming a class, orchestra you get credit for. So if we can use this, we can actually have written grades and have the ability to put something in the book that says yes. And I have information to back it up that says little Susie got a 95 on this, but she lacks in the expressive music department. So why is assessment important, right? A lot of times in music, we assess students in ways in which they are not comfortable and which are not proper for them. So, like I said earlier, we pull students off to the side, or we pull them into a quiet room and say, play this. And a lot of times students get nervous. I've seen students have anxiety attacks as a result of that. So part of my teaching philosophy, along with all of this, is that I want students to, A, be able to answer questions that I will pose problems to. I want them to know their part well enough and be autonomous enough that if I pull them into an assessment room, they do it. I don't want to do that, but that's the goal in the end. We want to make sure that their self-efficacy is good enough that they will be able to walk into that room and play it. We also want to be sure that we don't diminish their self-efficacy by bringing them into a room and saying, do this, and if they don't do it well, that would crush a student, especially, let's take, for example, a friend of mine. She was in high school, sophomore year, she was a girl. She lost it, had a huge crying attack in the middle of her playing test, said, I can't do it, I can't do it, I can't do it. That is the last thing that we ever want to see. And then going back, we have self-regulation. So we want students to know where they fall and to discipline themselves to kind of push forward and practice so that if this were to happen, they're confident. And this all ties into assessment, where how are we going to see how these students are doing, and how are we going to watch their progression, not just as musicians, not just as students, but as people? Because like I said earlier, music is an all-consuming thing. It's mind, body, spirit, if you wanted to put it in some philosophical terms. It takes a lot out of you. So all of these things go into my personal teaching philosophy, which is where I value what students feel, and I value how group work, how that's possible. I highly do not appreciate the pouring information in your head. That's just a personal thing in my philosophy, and of course everyone is different. I prefer more of, I understand the material. Let's help students understand the material by them pushing themselves and discovering new things. Oftentimes, especially in music, when students finally have that light bulb moment that's like, oh, I can do this, or oh my gosh, that note came out today. I've never done that before. Their self-efficacy jumps. And then you can pose different questions, such as, how are they today? So let's think of an example, right? You got that high G. How did you get that high G? What did you do differently? Recognizing what they do in order to improve themselves. So all of these things kind of jump into my personal teaching philosophy. And I hope this was an okay explanation. Thank you.